All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a sledgehammer to a really entrenched corporate myth, the idea that social initiatives are just charity, a nice to have, or even a drain on company resources. We are going to slip that completely upside down. And we're not just throwing theory at you. We've got hard, empirical data from a massive 9-year business case study proving that integrating social purpose is actually the ultimate driver of sustainable profit. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the profit versus purpose myth, the outside-in approach, dive into a case study on the Refinor refinery, look at how to implement a social strategy, and finally unpack that 9-year real-world test. Section 1. The profit versus purpose myth. So we gotta ask, is running a profitable business totally incompatible with doing social good? For decades, mainstream business theory has essentially shouted yes. Traditional literature treats social and environmental programs as defensive PR, liability insurance, or just a way to keep regulators off your back. The old assumption is that a manager's only job is to maximize quarterly results from the inside out, basically ignoring the society they actually operate in. The legendary management guru Peter Drucker hit the nail on the head with this one early on. He realized that this short-term, inward-looking management style drastically increases a business's intrinsic risks. Think about it. When you optimize only for what happens inside your own four walls, you're creating a massive blind spot. If the community right outside your doors is dealing with economic depression or crime, those problems are eventually going to crash through the glass. Pretending your company exists in a vacuum makes you totally blind to the social unrest that can and will derail your internal efficiency. Moving on to Section 2, the outside-in business approach. So, how do groundbreaking companies actually outgrow that old mindset? Well, look at the stark contrast here between these two planning methods. The old-school approach, macro planning, is inside out. You look at your internal capabilities, make a product, and push it out to exploit the current market. It's all about internal efficiency and defensive PR. But the outside-in approach, known as mega planning, flips the script entirely. It asks you to look at the world first. You identify the societal conditions your business needs to survive, and then work inward to build them. You aren't just reacting. You're actively creating a healthy market so your business can thrive. Think about Henry Ford for a second. He was basically doing this outside-in thing way before it had a formal name. Ford realized that mass-producing cars on an assembly line was literally useless if no one could afford to buy them. So what did he do? He aggressively raised his workers' wages. He wasn't running a charity. He was intentionally creating the middle-class consumer to guarantee a mass market for his own product. That is aligning business performance with a broader social vision. And this isn't just some abstract, pie-in-the-sky idea. It's a formal methodology called mega planning, developed by Roger Kaufman. Kaufman argued that for any organization to survive long-term, it absolutely must contribute to the measurable success of its clients and its community. It requires businesses to formally plan for a thriving society as a core baseline objective. And this exact framework sets the stage for our main case study. Section 3, Case Study Refinor Refinery. To see this play out in the real world, let's look at Refinor, a gas production company operating down in the Mercosur region of northwest Argentina. This timeline here represents an incredibly rare 9-year real-world A/B test. Over these years, Refinor went through 3 distinct management phases. It's the absolute perfect laboratory to compare conventional, inward-focused strategy against a mega-planning approach, and then see what happens when they go back to the old way. During that first conventional phase from 94 to 96, Refinor was super efficient internally. But outside, it was a disaster. Former state employees in the region had burned through their privatization severance funds, and they had no entrepreneurial skills to fall back on. Unemployment skyrocketed. Alcoholism and juvenile delinquency spiked. You had social protests that literally resulted in property loss and stolen fuel from the company itself. Refinor's own workers described it as living on an island of prosperity surrounded by a sea of social unrest. Sure, they were profitable on paper, but completely unsustainable in reality. Which brings us to Section 4, Implementing a Social Strategy. Realizing this wasn't going to end well, Refinor's leadership partnered with consultants in 1997 to launch a massive community intervention. They kicked it off with a process called social workouts. They brought everyone to the table: managers, employees, local teachers, doctors, union leaders. Together, they neutrally mapped out the massive gaps between the region's grim reality and what they called the minimal ideal vision, a self-sustaining future. They didn't just sit in a boardroom guessing. They actually mapped out the real gaps in skills and education with the people living through it. And they didn't just write a check to make the problem go away. They literally got their hands dirty. They helped locals start agricultural businesses. They set up agro-technical schools where Refinor supervisors actually taught real-world skills. They partnered up on health campaigns, and they organized youth soccer programs that gave meals and shelter to 6,000 kids, keeping them safe while their parents retrained. Oh, and a super crucial detail. They were heavily backed by a nonpartisan women's volunteer NGO, which was key in uniting families, picketers, and politicians behind this vision. The immediate impact was just staggering. In a 3-year span, formerly unemployed workers started 160 brand new self-sustaining ag businesses in the region. By helping the community become self-sufficient, Refinor essentially built a brand new, thriving client base from the ground up right in their own backyard.
Okay, Section 5, the 9-year real-world test.
Now for the million-dollar analytical question. Did all this community work actually translate to the bottom line? Check out the surge in the middle of this chart. In the first era, market share was stalled at 4.43%, but during the mega planning era, as those 160 new businesses started buying fuel, Refinor's market share jumped to 6.33%. That's nearly a 50% increase. But look at the right side. In 2000, the company was sold. New management scrapped the social strategy for short-term efficiency, and boom, market share plummeted right back down to 4.36%. But what about internally? Well, Refinor also saw a massive 50% drop in their own employee turnover rate. They kept their best talent because suddenly their employees didn't feel like they were raising their families in a war zone anymore. These numbers absolutely prove the direct link between societal health and corporate wealth. By cooling down that sea of social unrest, local unemployment was nearly cut in half. Riots dropped by 36%. And Refinor saved a ton on operation costs because fuel pilferage and pipeline damage practically vanished. By developing their community, they literally eliminated the conflicts that were bleeding their resources dry. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Take a hard look at your own organization or the companies you invest in. Are you just relying on defensive PR, building an isolated island of prosperity that's destined to be swallowed by the unrest around it? Or are you actively building a continent of sustainable growth? The data is crystal clear here, folks. Investing in your community isn't just a nice, charitable thing to do. It is absolutely the most profitable, sustainable business strategy you can deploy. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.